What if the person who took your daughter to ballet lessons also took your place in bed? And what if your child told the court everything? Subscribe for a story where innocence became testimony. Lena had always prided herself on appearances. At 38, she was the type of woman who knew how to balance a demanding HR job, keep her downtown St. Petersburg apartment tidy, and arrive at the parent-teacher meetings with homemade snacks in hand. The divorce with Eric, her husband of 10 years, had been what people might call amicable, or at least that's how it looked on paper. There had been no screaming matches, no broken dishes, no public custody battles, just two grown adults calmly agreeing to part ways for the sake of their 6-year-old daughter, Ava. Eric, a methodical and somewhat aloof auditor, had always favored order and precision over emotion. Lena, on the other hand, had mastered the art of emotional diplomacy. She could smile through pain, negotiate through tears, and keep her secrets behind carefully chosen words. To the outside world, they were the model of maturity, two exes co-parenting responsibly, rotating custody weeks, and exchanging polite texts about ballet class schedules and dentist appointments. Their daughter, Ava, was the kind of child who made strangers smile. Bright-eyed and precocious, she had a love for drawing fairies and practicing pliés in front of the living room mirror. She loved both her parents and took their split with the innocence only a 6-year-old could afford, believing it was simply a matter of space, of grown-ups needing different rooms to sleep in. In their quiet apartment, Lena maintained routines: pancakes on Sundays, coloring time before bed, a bubble bath every Friday. But there were cracks, tiny, hairline fractures that she hoped no one noticed. Like when Ava asked, "Why does Uncle Kyle stay over so many nights, Mommy?" Or the night Lena rushed to tuck Ava into bed an hour earlier than usual, her phone lighting up with a message that made her cheeks flush and her fingers tremble. Uncle Kyle, that's how Ava knew him. Kyle had been Lena's college friend, a frequent visitor during her separation. And lately, much more than that, he was charming, with a crooked smile and a comforting presence that filled the void Eric had left. Ava liked him, and Lena needed him, but need didn't look good in court documents. Especially not when the custody agreement hadn't been finalized. Eric, of course, noticed things. Ava's offhand comments, the unfamiliar jacket on the coat rack, the faint scent of cologne he knew didn't belong to him. He didn't say anything. Not yet. Instead, he played his role, arriving with a neutral smile and thoughtful questions like, "How's Ava been sleeping?" Or, "Did she finish her reading assignment?" He was building a case in silence, collecting data like he did at work, waiting for Lena to slip. One afternoon, when Eric arrived to pick up Ava, the girl ran to him with her usual excitement, waving a crayon drawing in one hand. "Daddy, look, it's me and Mommy and Uncle Kyle in our pajamas." Eric bent down, eyeing the cartoonish figures. 3 stick people in a bed. 3 smiley faces. He looked up at Lena, who managed a tight-lipped smile. "She's got quite the imagination," Lena said. "Yeah," Eric replied. "She always did." Inside, Lena's pulse quickened. She felt her grip tightening on the doorknob as Eric took Ava by the hand and walked away. There was no outburst, no accusation, but his eyes lingered longer than usual. That night, Lena sat at the kitchen counter long after Ava had gone to sleep. She stared at the empty wine glass in front of her and scrolled through her messages with Kyle. There were sweet nothings, sure, but also moments she knew would be impossible to explain in front of a judge. Moments that blurred the lines between comfort and recklessness. And still, Lena told herself she was in control, that everything was under wraps, that she could manage appearances until the custody agreement was finalized. She didn't anticipate how fragile a secret could become when it passed through the lips of a child. She didn't know it yet, but the world she so carefully curated was beginning to shift. Innocence, after all, has no filter, and courtrooms don't care how well you hide the truth behind bedtime stories and ballet shoes. The storm was coming. It didn't howl or rage. It whispered through crayons and pajamas and a child's innocent love. And Lena, for all her poise, was about to find out how easily a secret becomes a sentence. The courtroom wasn't imposing, but to Ava it might as well have been a castle made of silence and serious faces. The walls were pale, the windows high, and everything smelled faintly of paper and coffee. She sat on a chair that felt too big, her feet swinging back and forth, her sketchbook resting on her lap. Judge Corwin leaned forward, his face lined with both age and the wisdom of too many custody battles. "Ava, do you know why you're here today?" The little girl nodded. "To talk about Mommy and Daddy." "That's right, we just want to hear how things are at home. You can be honest here." "Okay." Ava blinked, then said, as if recalling a memory she wasn't supposed to repeat, "Mommy said not to talk about Uncle Kyle." There was a pause. The court reporter stopped typing. Judge Corwin straightened slightly. "And who is Uncle Kyle?" "He's Mommy's friend. He sleeps over when Daddy's not around. He sleeps in Mommy's bed." Silence snapped across the room like a whip. In the back, Eric stared at the floor. His hand curled into a fist on his knee. He didn't look at Lena. Lena, on the other hand, had gone pale. She opened her mouth slightly, but no words came out. She looked at Ava, then the judge, then back at her folded hands. The rest of the proceeding moved forward, but it may as well have stopped for Lena. Her heartbeat thumped in her ears like the ticking of a countdown. The judge thanked Ava, and the child was escorted out with a coloring book in hand. Unaware that her words had just detonated a legal landmine. That afternoon, Eric received an email from his attorney. The court was placing a temporary hold on the shared custody proposal. An emergency review would be scheduled. When Lena got home with Ava, she barely waited for the door to close before she turned on her daughter. "Why would you say that?" she snapped. Ava, startled, dropped her doll. "You told me not to lie," she whispered. "But you didn't have to say everything." Ava's eyes welled up. "Did I do something bad?" Lena froze. Her hands, raised in frustration, dropped slowly to her sides. "No, baby," she said after a long pause, voice cracking. "You didn't do anything wrong. Mommy made a mistake." She knelt to pick up the doll, brushing Ava's hair back with a trembling hand. But the words had already settled like dust into the corners of the room. Lena knew the damage wasn't just to her legal position. It was to the fragile trust she had tried so hard to maintain. Eric, meanwhile, didn't feel triumphant. He felt exhausted. Sitting in his car, parked outside his apartment, he replayed Ava's words in his mind. Not the content, but the tone. How innocent she sounded. How unaware she was of the weight her sentence carried. He didn't want to weaponize his daughter. He just wanted her safe. And right now, he wasn't sure Lena could provide that. Later that night, Lena sat in the darkened living room, her phone untouched. Kyle hadn't texted, and she hadn't reached out. A part of her resented him, not for being there, but for being a complication, for not knowing when to leave, for not understanding what was at stake. She poured a glass of wine but didn't drink it. She just stared at it, like it might offer an answer she hadn't found in court. Ava slept in the other room, curled under a fairy-themed comforter, unaware that her small voice had shifted the course of several lives. And Lena sat in the storm's eye, wondering not how to undo what had been said, but how to live with it. Eric wasn't a man of impulse. He had built a career on facts, documentation, and careful analysis, qualities that now served him well in the most personal investigation he'd ever undertaken. After the court hearing, he didn't rage, he didn't confront Lena or lash out. He simply started collecting data. His first move was hiring a private attorney who specialized in high-conflict custody cases. The man, sharp and efficient, immediately advised Eric to gather anything that would help establish an unstable environment in Lena's home. With the court temporarily halting shared custody, this was a narrow window to make a stronger case. Eric requested security footage from the management of Lena's apartment building. It took a formal request and a few days of waiting, but when the files came through, they painted a quietly damning picture. Kyle appeared in the footage again and again, arriving at Lena's unit late at night. Sometimes with a duffel bag. Sometimes carrying takeout. He left in the early mornings. Often before Ava woke up. 4 nights a week, sometimes 5. Eric cross-checked those dates with Lena's declared work schedule and noticed that on many of the nights Kyle stayed over. Lena had logged time off or left early. He dug deeper. Kyle wasn't just a friend from college or an occasional visitor. He was effectively living there part-time. Then came a more troubling discovery. A background check, run discreetly through his lawyer, revealed that Kyle had a misdemeanor charge related to drug possession several years prior. It was classified as minor and had been expunged from public record. But it was still there. Eric didn't jump to conclusions. But it raised red flags. He printed everything: timestamps, photos, copies of court documents. Then came the iPad. Ava's iPad was synced to Lena's eCloud account, which she often forgot to log out of. Eric had bought the tablet for Ava himself and knew it occasionally picked up text messages from Lena's phone. He wasn't actively snooping, not at first. But one evening, Ava left it on the kitchen counter during a drop-off, and a message pinged. "Miss you already. Last night was perfect." It was from Kyle. Eric stared at the message. Frozen. It was followed by a heart emoji and a photo. Not explicit, but intimate. Lena curled against Kyle on what appeared to be a bed. Not their bed. Not Ava's bed. Somewhere unfamiliar. Eric took screenshots before handing the iPad back to Ava, who was busy drawing flowers in the Notes app. Eric's lawyer looked over the findings with growing interest. "This," he said, gesturing to the stack of evidence, "shows a pattern of behavior that contradicts Lena's statements under oath." The twist came unexpectedly. At a weekend birthday party for one of Ava's classmates, Eric chatted with another parent, a woman named Denise whose daughter also took ballet. She mentioned Lena in passing, then hesitated. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Is Kyle still around your ex-wife's place?" Eric nodded slowly. Look, my husband coached a youth league once. And he knows Kyle. Says he's not a bad guy. But not someone you want your kid around unsupervised. That's all I'll say." Eric thanked her, his heart sinking. It wasn't a smoking gun, but it was enough to push him further. Meanwhile, Lena was beginning to unravel. The court's decision to suspend shared custody had blindsided her. She stopped hosting dinners. Kyle noticed her growing distant, more irritable. She jumped whenever the doorbell rang. She double-checked the locks at night. One evening, she sat in bed scrolling through parenting blogs, looking for reassurance that this was all just a rough patch. She turned to Kyle, who was brushing his teeth in the bathroom, and said, "You don't think Ava is scared of you, right?" Kyle paused. "What kind of question is that? Just answer." "No, of course not. She's a sweet kid. Why would she be scared?" Lena didn't respond. Instead, she stared at the reflection of her own face in the dark screen of her phone. Ava, meanwhile, was growing quieter. She colored less, asked fewer questions. During one evening cuddle on the couch, she looked up at Lena and whispered, "Did I make Daddy mad?" Lena's heart broke. "No, sweetie, you didn't make anyone mad. Then why are you and Daddy fighting more now?" Lena hugged her tightly. "Sometimes grown-ups have to work through hard things. But it's not your fault." Ava nodded, but Lena could tell the answer hadn't landed. The guilt had. It sat between them, unspoken, a small but heavy thing. Eric saw it too. Ava didn't run to him at pickups like before. She held his hand but didn't chatter about her day. She asked questions he didn't know how to answer. "If Mommy loves Kyle, does that mean she doesn't love me and Daddy anymore?" Eric knelt down, looked her in the eye. "Love doesn't run out, sweetheart, but sometimes people forget how to use it right." She nodded again, quiet. The court date loomed. Eric compiled everything. He didn't want to destroy Lena. He didn't even want full custody just to win. He just wanted to protect Ava. And part of him knew, deep down, that protection sometimes meant taking away the thing you once loved. Lena wasn't evil. She wasn't reckless in the way headlines made mothers out to be. But she had gambled with trust, with Ava's safety, with appearances that mattered more in court than in heart. And now, every move was a calculation, every misstep, a piece of evidence. The case wasn't over, but the scale was tipping. Not with fury, not with shouting, but with quiet truths Ava never meant to tell. And with a father who had finally learned that silence, too, could be a weapon, if used with care. The courtroom had changed, no longer a chamber of polite civility. It now thrummed with tension thick enough to slice with a knife. Lena sat at the plaintiff's table, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, knuckles white. The room was colder today. Or maybe that was just the chill of being under scrutiny. Eric sat across from her, stoic. His lawyer, a woman named Marla Hensley, organized her stack of documents with the precision of someone ready to dismantle an entire image. When Judge Corwin entered, everyone stood. When they sat again, the trial began not with noise, but with a calm presentation of facts, and then, the evidence came like waves. Your Honor, Marla began, standing tall and clear-voiced. We submit photographic evidence from building security showing Mr. Kyle Henderson arriving and departing Ms. Rivera's residence multiple nights per week. We also submit a series of messages retrieved legally from a shared iPad device. Screens lit up, the texts were displayed, endearments, sleepovers, intimacy documented with the oblivious openness of people who never expected to be exposed. Lena sat frozen. She hadn't expected Eric to gather so much. She hadn't even thought he noticed. Kyle had been careful, but clearly not careful enough. Then came the neighbors. 2 women, one a retiree who lived next door, the other a young teacher from across the hall. Yes, I've heard things, said the retiree. At night, often, it wasn't hard to tell what was going on. It made me uncomfortable, the teacher said, especially because I knew there was a child in that apartment. The words landed like strikes. Lena tried to sit tall, but her spine felt like it might give way. When her turn came, her lawyer asked for the opportunity to explain. Lena spoke carefully. Kyle is a friend. He's been supportive during a very hard time. Ava knows him, feels safe around him. I never meant to deceive anyone. Did you instruct your daughter not to mention Kyle to the court? The judge asked. Lena hesitated. I asked her not to talk about things that were private. The judge raised a brow. A 6-year-old doesn't distinguish between private and court relevant. Then came Ava. She entered the courtroom holding a plush rabbit. The judge spoke gently, asking only simple questions. Did Mommy ever ask you not to talk about Kyle? Ava looked at Lena, then back to the judge. Yes, Mommy said it would make things worse. The words echoed. Lena tried to breathe, but it caught in her throat. And does Kyle stay over a lot? Ava nodded. When Daddy's not home, he brings Mommy flowers. They sleep together. The courtroom didn't gasp. It didn't need to. The silence was heavier. Ava sniffled. Am I in trouble? The judge shook his head gently. No, sweetheart. You've been very brave. Ava began to cry. Eric closed his eyes. His lips pressed tight. He didn't want this. He didn't want to see Ava like this. He looked over at Lena, who looked hollowed out, like someone who had just watched her world fracture in slow motion. After Ava was escorted out, Lena turned her head, just slightly, toward Eric. Her expression wasn't anger anymore. It was sorrow, but that sorrow did nothing to undo the damage. Judge Corwin announced that a final decision would be rendered within the week. The court adjourned. People filed out. Lena remained seated, unmoving, even as her attorney whispered that they needed to regroup. Outside, Eric met Ava at the courthouse steps. She ran into his arms, and he held her like a shield. Not against Lena, but against all of it. The courtroom, the questions, the things she never should have had to carry. Inside, Lena finally stood. She walked slowly, almost like she didn't know where she was going. Kyle wasn't there. He hadn't come. He hadn't called. She felt the absence like an indictment of its own. She whispered to herself as she walked into the hallway. Voice barely audible. I thought I could handle it. I thought I was protecting her. But she hadn't been. And now, Her daughter couldn't even look at her the same way again. The final ruling came on a rainy Thursday morning. The courtroom was less full this time. No neighbors, no long-winded testimony, just Lena, Eric, the attorneys, and a decision. The judge spoke with the measured tone of someone who understood the weight of their words. Primary custody will be awarded to Mr. Rivera. Ms. Rivera will have supervised visitation, not to exceed twice a month, pending further evaluation. Lena didn't react outwardly. She sat very still, almost too still, her breath so shallow it barely disturbed her chest. Ava wasn't there, and that absence cut more deeply than any legal verdict. It was the silence of a bond broken. She left the courthouse alone. The rain hit her like tiny, wet needles, but she didn't open her umbrella. There was a kind of penance in feeling it all, letting herself get soaked. Her lawyer offered her a ride. She declined. There was no destination, really. Back at home, the apartment felt foreign. Ava's drawings were still on the fridge. The pink ballet shoes were still by the door. Her bed was still made with care. The stuffed animals arranged exactly as Ava had left them. But none of it felt alive. Lena tried calling. Eric didn't block her, but he didn't always answer. She left voicemails. She sent messages. Sometimes she tried humor. Sometimes she pleaded. She tried to explain things she hadn't been able to say in court. But there was always a pause. A silence. And when Eric finally did reply, it was brief. Ava needs time. Time. The very thing Lena had squandered. Her supervised visits were scheduled through a family services center. Sterile rooms. Glass panels. A third party present at all times. Ava came in holding a coloring book. She smiled, but it was the kind of smile that felt rehearsed. Her eyes didn't stay on Lena long. They would talk. Lena would ask about school, about ballet. Ava would answer politely. She never said she missed her. She never said she was angry either. She just talked, like one might with a teacher they liked but didn't really know. After one visit, Lena stayed behind in the room. Long after Ava left, the supervisor eventually cleared her throat. Lena nodded, gathered her things, and left. At home, she avoided the news. She avoided Kyle. They hadn't spoken in weeks. He'd disappeared the moment the ruling came in. And Lena didn't chase him. Not anymore. What would be the point? She tried therapy once, but she left halfway through the session when the counselor asked her gently, "Do you believe you prioritized your daughter's needs?" She didn't know what to say. Years passed. Eric didn't remarry. Ava grew older, quieter. Her birthday parties were small. On her 10th birthday, she asked for a trip to the aquarium. Eric obliged. They walked past tanks glowing with electric blue, jellyfish dancing like ghosts. That night, after cake and candles, Eric tucked her into bed. She looked at him, suddenly serious. "Daddy?" "Yeah, sweetheart. I miss Mommy, sometimes, but I don't think I can trust her." Eric smoothed her hair. "You don't have to decide anything right now. Just feel what you feel. That's okay." Ava nodded. "Did she ever say sorry?" Eric hesitated. "Yes, many times." "Okay." Ava turned on her side. "But sometimes sorry doesn't fix things." He didn't reply. He just stayed until she fell asleep. That same night, Lena sat in her apartment. The light from the street casting long shadows through the blinds. She had cleaned out Ava's room but hadn't redecorated it. It remained as it was, a shrine to a time she couldn't get back. She opened her journal and wrote, "Some children grow up not because they turn 10, but because they learn how not to cry when love disappoints them." She closed the book. On her next supervised visit, she brought Ava a new art set. Watercolors, brushes, paper. Ava smiled again, maybe a little more real this time. But when the visit ended, she gave the set back. "I don't want to take sides." Lena nodded. "Okay, I understand." But she didn't, not really. The pain of watching your child build a wall with your own bricks was something she couldn't explain to anyone. One afternoon, years later, Lena attended a school event. Not as a guest. She sat in the back, among other parents who came for the music recital. Ava was on stage, playing violin. Her posture was poised, her face serious. When the recital ended, Lena stayed in her seat while others clapped and dispersed. Ava walked past. She saw her, and didn't stop. Lena watched her daughter walk away, straight into Eric's arms. Ava looked happy, whole, and Lena told herself that was what mattered most. She stepped outside into the cool evening air, leaned against the wall, and whispered to no one in particular. She told the truth, and it cost me everything. But maybe that's justice. The wind moved through the trees. Somewhere, a bell rang, and Lena walked home, alone, with the echoes of a childhood she would never again be part of. If you believe the worst betrayals are the ones seen through innocent eyes, hit that subscribe button now and don't miss what's coming next. Because in our next story, a game of hide and seek turned into a heartbreaking reveal. A little girl hid in the wrong place, and saw something no child ever should. Coming up, Miguel from Miami, his daughter saw the affair while playing hide and seek. A tale of broken trust, public shame, and a father's fight to protect what's left. Subscribe now. Stay with Infidelity Chronicles, where truth hides in the quietest corners, and always comes out.